Hey everyone, welcome back to another Ragnarok M classic video. Today I will give a detailed breakdown about Ivory Lance and will also test an actual PvP to see if it can compete with our main weapon Spearfish Pike. Before we proceed, I want to shout out the sponsor of today's video. Do you want to grind on multiple accounts at the same time like this? LD Cloud Phone got your back. LD Cloud Phone lets you launch multiple virtual devices and game in the cloud. No storage used, no battery drained, and no data wasted. Just non-stop gaming, anytime, anywhere. I'm using this to do boss hunts in my other accounts. It helps me to ensure that I finish my 5 MVP and 15 mini chances on all of my accounts every day. It also helps me to grind all of my accounts at the same time. You can switch between other devices without worrying to be disconnected. As you can see, my 2 accounts are grinding here, and the best part is you can close the app or your data and your accounts will still remain online and grinding. LD Cloud Phone is available in Android, iOS, and PC. Use my link in the pinned comment and video description to download and access a new user free trial. Thank you and happy grinding. In my previous video, someone said that Ivory Lance doesn't ignore the defense of the PvP players because Ivory Lance ignores the defense of monsters, except for MVP. So the PvP players is also not included because it is also not a monster. Technically, he is right about the damage to monsters, since damage to monsters are not working in PvP players. Let me show it to you. As you can see, the Advanced Mistletoe card didn't provide any damage boost, even though it has a 10% damage increase to all monsters. But this is not the case on Ivory Lance, because if we look the description of the Ignore defense, it says that ignore enemies' defense. And if you think about it, PvP players are actually enemies, so it means Ivory Lance will ignore the defense of PvP players. But of course, we still need to test it to confirm whether it ignores defense or not. So let's test it first. I will remove all of my equipment except for weapon, offhand, and armor. We need to do this to see our damage without a lot of ignore defense. I will use 70% dummy strength, and I will also set to demi-human with holy element to disable the Ivory second effect, which is 20% damage to neutral monster. I will compare these two weapons in this test, since they have almost the same attack stat. The only difference is the ignore defense. Our damage using Ivory Lance is 41,000. Now let's test the other weapon. It became 18,000. The Ivory Lance has higher damage since it has ignored death effect. This is important because we will test it in actual player later. If Ivory Lance does not ignore death, then it will have the same or lower damage compared to the other weapon. Let's try increasing our ignore death to see if it will also help the Ivory Lance. So our damage increased to 54,000. This means that even we are using Ivory Lance, we still need more ignore death. I think it can only ignore 100% of the ignore death. I also tried this 2 normal monsters, and yes, Ivory Lance is just 100% ignore death, since my damage is also getting boosted if I add more ignore death. Now let's test it in actual PvP player. We will use the same weapon to compare the damage. The other spear has higher attack stat, So if Ivory Lance doesn't ignore player def, then the damage should be lower. Let's check the enemy stats. By the way, it has Angeling card, so it means it's not neutral, so the 20% damage to neutral of Ivory Lance is not going to work. Let's see the damage of this weapon first. I have 4,798 attack while using this one. My damage is 24,688. Now let's switch to Ivory Lance. As you can see, I have lower attack using Ivory, so the damage must be lower if it does not ignore defense. My damage is 37,739, so it is a lot higher. It is because it ignores the defense. Let's see the damage if the enemy is neutral. I removed the Angeling card, so it became neutral. Now my damage is 47,000. So this means that the Ivory Lance does work in PvP players. But even if we are using Ivory Lance, we still need ignore defense, especially if the enemy have a lot of defense. So now that we confirmed it, it's time to compare it to our main weapon. Now I have my full gears and buffs. We will see which one deals more damage to PvP players. For this test, I will just use the Zeny-only card since I only have one slot to my Ivory Lance. Also, my main weapon has 10% ignore def, so I will balance it by removing our pet. Now I have 77% ignore def. My damage is 327,777. Now let's switch to Ivory Lance. We have to keep our ignore def gears and cards, since Ivory Lance doesn't entirely ignore the defense of tanky players. Here's our stat. We have 72% ignore def here. So the damage is a lot lower compared to our main weapon. I think even without Zeny-only card in our main weapon, it will deal more damage. But I think you can still use Ivory Lance if you don't have Spearfish Pike, but it's better to use Spearfish if you have it. Let's see my total damage with 100% ignore defense. I'm using my PvE setup here because guild rentals aren't functioning in this PvP map. However, in Guild vs. Guild GVG, I use the Zeny-only card to improve my hit rate, as I don't require minorist deposits to achieve 100% ignore defense. GVG rental gear can easily get a 20% ignore def enchant, which is why I prefer that setup. Here's my total damage, but it can get higher in GVG since I got more buff from party and GVG rentals are broken. So in my opinion, you can use Ivory Lance, but you still need ignore def to catch up with the main weapon damage since Ivory Lance doesn't have that much damage multiplier. It just ignores 100% of defense. So I would still prefer our main weapon. Anyway, that's it for this video. Don't forget to give a like and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you, and see you on the next one.